excited to be joined today by Kristina Murr. Kristina Murr runs Awaken Counseling Services. And I am going to talk with her a little bit today about what you can expect to feel in the aftermath of your divorce and what you can do about it and how you can cope. So, Kristina, thank you so much for joining me.
I'm glad to be here.
Great. All right. So tell me about you and about what you do.
So I am a licensed professional counselor in Marietta. I have a practice, Awaken Counseling. It's me and two other clinicians. Both are licensed clinical social workers. We work with individuals with a wide range of issues, depression, anxiety, stress, chronic pain, OCD, postpartum. And a lot of the people that we see have relationship problems or are going through a divorce or have been divorced. We also see kids of people who are going through divorce or have been divorced, and we work with them as well.
Okay. So tell me, what are some things that people should consider after they've been through a divorce in terms of kind of getting their head on straight again?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot to think about when you've gotten divorced or you're thinking about getting divorced. A couple of the things to think about are going to be finances and job, time management, childcare. These are all things that are going to be just something that you really have to spend some time thinking through. I think in terms of like finances and your job, you're going to have to really look at your finances and say, is what I'm making now enough? If you're somebody that didn't work outside of the home, maybe you're a stay-at-home mom, you might consider, maybe taking some classes at a community college or maybe even, finding a job, easing back into a job. Some people will start in like retail or something like that. I also work with a lot of people that get divorced and maybe get some kind of certification to work in like a doctor's office or do some kind of like billing or coding or something like that. So those would be some things to think about. If you're somebody that has been working outside the home and you now find that because you're by yourself, you're not making enough, this would be a good time to consider maybe talking to your boss about, is there any upward mobility in this job? And if there's not, maybe finding something else that you'd like to do, or maybe there's been something else that you've been thinking about doing, but just never really wanted to jump into. This could be an opportunity for you to really jump into that. I think in terms of like childcare, that's something that you're going to have to think about if you have children. And I think that's something that some people really struggle with. Oftentimes people feel guilty for having to put their kids in aftercare or, some kind of daycare. I think if you're going to have to do that, maybe ask around, get some references or referrals from people that use, childcare, and don't be too hard on yourself if you have to do that. You've got to do whatever you have to do to make it work. And research shows that, when children are around other children in daycare, it's actually good for them. In terms of time management, I think most people will find that they don't have as much time as they used to, when they were married. So you're going to have to really prioritize to figure out, how you're going to get everything done. And some things aren't going to get done. And so I would say, maybe aim for 80% versus 100% and give yourself some grace if you can't get everything done.
What are some tips you have? So I know you said you work with children. What are some tips that you have for helping children navigate the transition from one home to two?
Yeah, so that's a big change for children. And if you think about it, they didn't really have a say-so in this. And so if you think, if you were the one that had to pack up your stuff every week and move, to another home and go back and forth, what would that be like for you? And, kind of put yourself in their shoes to think, well, that's what it's like for them. So you really have to kind of just be aware of that and do what you can to ease that for them. And one of the ways you can do that is to limit the packing and unpacking. And that might mean, keeping two sets of school books, one set at mom's house, one set at dad's house, tennis shoes at mom's house, tennis shoes at dad's house, favorite video game console at mom's, that kind of thing. That way the kids don't have to, it makes it a little bit easier to kind of go back and forth. So that would be one thing. And then I think if you're a parent that's going to have to live somewhere else, and now you have to get a new home or apartment or whatever you have to do, and your kid now has a new room, maybe let them play some kind of part in that. Maybe they can pick the comforter or the TV stand or the paint color, whatever you can do to empower them, make them feel like they have some say-so in this, some control. And then lastly, I would say be there to validate their feelings. They're going to tell you from time to time, I don't like having to go to dad's, or I don't like having to pack my stuff to go to mom's, or whatever. And you don't have to change the situation for them, but you can be there to say, I get it. This is really hard for you, or I get it. This is a really tough time for you.
What are some things that you should definitely not do for helping your children try and cope and adjust to a new normal following a divorce?
So I would say the number one thing to not do would be, do not use your child as a therapist. Oftentimes, parents, in an effort to process what's going on, they kind of rely on their child as the therapist and triangle their child into the conflict with their ex. And you can do this by saying, to your child, oh, your dad just never understands, or that kind of thing. And that really is damaging for the child. The child might already be struggling. So to hear that, and the child loves you both, it puts them in a really weird position. So it's bad for the child. It's bad for your relationship with your child, because eventually your child is going to, try to create some distance between the two of you. And then ultimately that affects you. So by doing that, you're doing nobody any good.
And what do you do if you're the parent and you suspect that the other parent is using the child in that way, or otherwise being inappropriate with the child in terms of using the child as a therapist or as a go-between? What do you do then?
I would say, a lot of what goes on at dad's house or the other parent's house, you're not going to be able to control. So if the child comes home and says to you, like, hey, this other parent is saying, this about you, you can say to the child, again, validate, I get it. That's really difficult for you when, this other parent, calls me names, or, I get it. That's really hard for you. And then you can teach your child to advocate for himself or herself by saying, when dad, says those kind of things, why don't you, say, I'm feeling really uncomfortable when you're saying that, or, that's really hard for me to hear, or I don't like it when you talk about my other parent. And then if the child continues to struggle, sometimes getting your child into some kind of counseling, just to have, somebody build rapport and talk these things out with, and teach your child to be assertive and advocate for themselves, can be helpful.
That's really helpful. Just to give them, a standard response. I really don't want to talk about mom with you, or I really don't, if that's okay with you, and to empower them without, and you haven't said what I like about that is you haven't said anything negative about the other parent. You haven't said that they're right or they're wrong or anything. You've just given your child a tool, and then validated what they're feeling. That's really good advice. What advice do you have on co-parenting? So a lot of times people have just gone through a divorce and they are doing this co-parenting for the first time. A lot of moms that I work with, they've been the primary decider of everything. They've decided on school clothes, and they've decided on meals, and they've decided on, scheduling and extracurricular activities. And it's never been a problem. And now that they're divorced, they've got dad suddenly, wanting to jump in. How do you manage that?
Well, I mean, this is a tough one. I mean, co-parenting is a big issue. It's an important issue, and it's a big one. I say there are a few couples that I know of that divorce, and they are able to do the co-parenting thing really well. They're able to both, show up for their kids and get along, and maybe even, celebrate holidays together, or might even get each other something on Father's Day and Mother's Day, and they can really get on the same page. And if you can do that, great. But I would say a lot of couples, or a lot of people that are divorced, they're not able to do that. and understandably so. I say most of the people that I talk to, or most of the individuals that I work with that are having co-parenting issues, they really want their ex to get on the same page. And what I would usually recommend is doing some kind of like co-parenting counseling where, you both go see somebody together, you work on this co-parenting thing, you get on the same page. And as much as I recommend that, it never happens. They never follow through. Either one person doesn't want to do it, or they both don't want to do it, or they both can't sit in the same room together. So it just doesn't happen. So if that's the case in your situation, what you have to focus on is what you can control in your own home. And those would be, the things like setting the rules in your home, making your kid eat the fruits and vegetables at your home, setting the bedtime, setting, the homework schedule, all of that. Do it for your home. And if they don't do that at dad's, you have to let it go. And again, in this situation, like in the other situation, you can teach your kid to be an advocate for themselves, and you can point out, hey, when you eat pizza, 3 days in a row at, your ex's house, I've noticed your stomach starts to hurt a lot. Teach your child to be aware of those things so that your child can, when they go over to your ex's and they're eating junk, every day, they can say, well, hey, this is actually hurting my stomach. I need to have some vegetables in here. Or, if they're going to bed really late, they can advocate for themselves and say, hey, sometimes when I go to bed really late, I'm falling asleep at school the next day, so I need to get myself to bed earlier, even if my parent over here says I can go to bed at whatever time I want. So those would be a couple of things that you can do. I think you also, if you have an ex that won't get on the same page with you, oftentimes you want to, push that person and say, hey, I want you to do this and this. And then that person is going to do the opposite, oftentimes just to spite you. So you have to be aware of that. You have to focus on what you can control at your own home. And if you're really frustrated with your ex, go do something for yourself. Go exercise, go burn off those stress hormones in some way. And then just decide to let it go.
That's very empowering. Just do what you can do and then let it go.
Yeah.
It's hard to do. It's hard for people who aren't divorced and dealing with an ex.
Yeah.
What are some ways, other than what you've talked about so far, some other ways that you can take care of yourself after divorce?
So I think, like I've mentioned before, exercise is a good one. I mean, it's going to make you feel good about yourself. It's going to just overall burn off some of the stress hormones that can kind of build up throughout this. But getting involved in something, maybe getting involved in a book club or taking up a new hobby or gardening or something like that. Those would be things that you could do. Or getting involved in, some kind of organization, just really trying to prioritize yourself. I think if you do have kids, sometimes we can spend so much time taking care of our kids that we kind of fall to the back burner. And you really need to make sure that you're not doing that, especially if you're, in the middle of processing things like stress, anxiety, depression. I mean, you really need to focus on taking good care of yourself. So do what you would tell a friend to do. If a friend is really struggling, you would say, well, go get a massage, go do something for yourself, go do something, good for yourself. Apply that to yourself. I would also say setting good boundaries is going to be important here. There are going to be people that come up and ask you about your divorce, and sometimes you're going to want to talk about it, but sometimes you're not. So you have to be assertive here, and you have to be willing to say to them, this is not something I want to talk about right now, or, you're making me feel uncomfortable by asking me that, or those kind of things to really set the boundaries.
That's good. So you've gotten a divorce and now you think you want to date again. What advice do you have for getting yourself ready to do that? And how do you know when you're ready?
I think it depends on the person. Usually men are going to get back into the dating scene quicker than women will. So if you're a woman and you see that your ex has jumped back into dating, but you're not ready to jump back into dating, that's okay. Do it at your own pace. And if you need to ease back into it slowly, do so. There are some people that, after a few months are ready to date again. But then there's some people, especially if they were married like really early on, they might want to take 6 months to a year just to have some time for themselves and discover who they are as a person and start creating their new life. Whatever you decide to do is fine. I think you just have to decide what's going to work best for you. And then once you are ready to start dating, you're going to have to think about, well, where am I going to find this person? And nowadays, people do the online dating thing. I think there's some apps that, are more helpful than others. So you might want to ask around to anybody who's been successful on those and find out, which apps are worth, paying to get on. You can also just let friends and family members know that you're ready to date again, because these are the people that know you the best. So they may know somebody that they could set you up with, or that you may be a good fit with. This would also be a good time to get involved and stay involved in some kind of club or organization or church, or whatever you can do as a way of being around other people and trying to meet other people. And then I think once you've been dating for a little bit, you then, if you have kids, you have to think about, well, when do I introduce this person to my kids? I would suggest maybe after about 6 months would be a good time to introduce this person to your kids, if you have decided to be exclusive, and then also if you feel like this person is going to be a positive influence on your kids.
At what point would you, not only you've answered the question of when is a reasonable time to introduce a significant other to your children, but what about introducing your significant other's children to your children? Is that an additional step, or is that kind of, you can do that simultaneously with the introduction of the significant other?
I would say, if you can, make it an additional step. When you introduce your kids to this person, it would be best to do it in maybe like a non-threatening way, in a way where they're going to be the most comfortable. So maybe if you have this person eat dinner with y'all at your house, where the kids are in their own home, so they're comfortable, and then bring that person in. And then once they've met this person and they can start to wrap their head around, this is a person that's going to be in my life, then you would take the next step of bringing this person's kids into the situation. But I would say if you can avoid it, not too much at once.
Right. And what suggestions do you have for any dealings that you may have to have with your ex-spouse's new significant other? That can get pretty emotional when we're dealing with the new girlfriend or the new boyfriend.
Yeah.
What advice do you have there?
If you have a good relationship with your ex and then you have any concerns about this person that they're dating, bring it up to your ex. But you might not have a good relationship with your ex, and your ex might not be willing to hear your concerns. So in that case, if there is something you're concerned about, or if there's something that this person is doing around your children that you don't like, you can talk to your children about it. Again, not in a way where you're talking poorly about this person, but just helping them to be, assertive if this person is doing something that they don't like. And then again, you go focus on what you can do, or what you can control, exercise, or doing something for yourself if you're feeling angry or frustrated about the situation. But at the end of the day, your ex is going to date whoever they want to date, and you can't control that. And even if you really dislike this person and you told your ex, it's not likely that they're going to break up with this person because of what you said. I mean, they may even date this person for even longer because you don't like this person. So I think you just have to do what you can to manage your feelings on your own, instead of trying to insert yourself into this other situation.
Yeah, I end up telling my clients a lot of the same thing. Like, you kind of got to stay in your own lane. You want people to respect your boundaries, and
Yeah.
you want your home to be sort of a sovereign place for you and your kids, and your relationship to be private. And you're going to have to then respect those same boundaries going the other direction. And
and the reality is, it may be hard, especially if you are still single and you're not ready to date, and you see your ex dating somebody. I mean, that can be really difficult. And that would be, a time where you might want to go back to scheduling your time to be upset, or scheduling your time to be frustrated. Allow yourself, 20 or 30 minutes of a pity party, or of a time to get angry. And then after that, put a stop on it and keep it moving for the rest of the day.
Well, that is really great advice. I really appreciate you sharing your insights with me today. So tell me again, what's your website and what's your phone number? And does anybody get in touch with you?
So if they want to get in touch with us, you can go on the website. It's www.awakencounseling.com, or you can call us. Our number is 678-310-0358. You can also email us, and that's Kristina with a K at awakencounseling.com.
Okay, wonderful. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time today, and I appreciate all your insight.
Well, great. It was great to see you, Tracy.